college football playoff rankings were just released. As a general rule of thumb, we could not care less about this stuff. However, I did have one thing that just dawned on me as I was walking down the hallway. It has not been the best of weeks for Director Colin because you cut him open, whereas you and I just bleed normal old blood. He bleeds orange. Maybe this kind of orange here in the chalice of choice liquids, a term not patented by me. And so Colin was down bad after Saturday. But you know what? He's really not. Because Director Colin and the Tennessee Volunteers are favored to make the playoffs still. They were the number 5 ranked team in the playoff rankings released a little while ago if you're watching live. And they're favored. They're like minus 160. If you bet a straight up yes or no prop, does Tennessee make it? Tennessee is favored, like significantly favored to make the playoff right now. And if you look at the remainder of their schedule, the only hurdle is themselves. Their biggest hurdle is in the mirror. They're the odds to win the national championship on the screen right now. They're gone. Because keep this up. Keep the Tennessee schedule up. So they've got Missouri, at South Carolina, at Vanderbilt. Let me tell you something. If Tennessee drops one of those games, it just wasn't meant to be. So they should run through the rest of this November. They should still be a team on a mission. They dust themselves off after last week, just like LSU did. You know, LSU got bounced by Tennessee. What did they do? They just proceeded to go on the best run of their season. Well, Tennessee needs to do the same thing post-Georgia. Now let me see those odds to win the national championship again, because this is what I want you to pay close attention to. Georgia, favored to win the title. Ohio State 2, Michigan 3. Essentially, one of those will win come, November 20, whatever. And so the other will be out of there. And then you got Tennessee there at 4. Tennessee's got better odds to win the title than TCU does, which is basically odds makers telling you once they get there, we would favor Tennessee by double digits on a neutral field against TCU. That's a fact, by the way. So that's what the first thing I thought about was. The second thing I'm thinking, and I was just doing an HQ hit right before we came on air. We've never done that before, but I did that tonight. They're asking a lot about these head-to-head matchups. A lot of folks want to know what happens when we get to the end of the year and we may have a Pac-12 champion, whether it's USC or Oregon. I'm just over here saying, excuse me, UCLA is still in this. I'm not favoring them to win it. I'm just saying they're 12th right now, I think, 12th or 13th. And they still got USC to play. If they played Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game and they would have a chance to avenge their only loss, just something to keep in mind. Anyway, you got the Big 12. They will produce a champion. Maybe it's an undefeated TCU. Who knows? You've got the Pac-12. They will produce a champion. Maybe it's a one-loss USC or a one-loss Oregon. Who knows? Here's my question. If we get into one of these hypothetical scenarios where we have to compare a Tennessee against one of those teams, what happens? Well, if it's an undefeated TCU, TCU's getting the nod. But outside of that, anything's on the table. And I'm thinking to myself, if USC were to win that Pac-12 championship, you are adding wins against UCLA, against Notre Dame, all of a sudden ranked tonight, and presumably a Pac-12 championship game against an Oregon. Let's just assume for a second. Their only loss, as you see, is a 1-point loss on the road at a ranked Utah team. I think USC, as a Pac-12 champ, would probably get a nod over Tennessee if it were a head-to-head. It may not come down to that. Oregon, it's a little bit different, maybe, because with Oregon, a lot of folks are saying, yeah, you got that blowout loss against Georgia, so in a head-to-head, you can't overcome that. Well, let me remind you, they got a game versus a ranked team this weekend. They got another game versus another ranked team next weekend. And Oregon State not being ranked is a travesty because they're one of the 25 best teams in America. So they've got 3 games left on their schedule that are 3 of the toughest games they will have played all year. And if they go to the Pac-12 championship game and play UCLA or USC, they'll add a 4th one there. That's going to be a heck of a resume for Oregon if and when it comes that time. So that's really the only thing on my mind. And the other is how the Big Ten gets handled. Like if Michigan goes into Ohio State and wins, like I think Michigan's in, obviously, I don't know how they handle Ohio State. If Ohio State wins that game, Michigan's resume is not going to be strong enough, I think, that fall out. So the only other thing to just remember here is LSU controls their destiny. And Colin, I know I'm hopping around, so just try your best to keep up. I think you need to realize how important this weekend is. This weekend, LSU goes to Arkansas. We're going to break the game down later. And they are a 3-point favorite. Not 13, not 30. They're a 3-point favorite. If they win the game, they got UAB the following week. They go to Texas A&M. I mean, they're sitting there to where they control their playoff destiny, I believe, because an SEC champ's getting in. But if they were to lose this weekend, let me paint you the wildest scenario I think that could happen. If LSU loses this weekend and Bama beats Ole Miss, neither of which are a given, there would be so much pressure on LSU in that final game at Texas A&M because all Bama would have to do at that point is beat Auburn. LSU would need to beat Texas A&M. In other words, you could have a de facto SEC West title game, for one party at least, and the SEC West could be on the line. If they don't take care of business against Arkansas Saturday, the SEC West could be on the line that final weekend of the season. And at that point, maybe you got a healthy Connor Wigman, and you got A&M welcoming LSU in, and that's a true Super Bowl spot for the Aggies. They got nothing else to play for, maybe bowl eligibility. I would highly advise LSU just go ahead and take care of business this week. Okay, here's what you need to know. I want you to bookmark this. You can send it to your friends, your mom, your dad, anybody who's wondering, what happens if? Well, what happens if? Who's going to win that conference? Who's favored to win this? Who's still alive there? This is all you need to know. In the SEC, it's going to be Georgia's in the East. That's already locked down. In the West, I just told you, LSU's in the driver's seat. Bama's still faintly alive there. Ole Miss is still alive, but LSU controls it because they got the head-to-head win over Ole Miss. They got the head-to-head win over Bama. And so before you even start to breathe life into a race over there, you're going to have LSU lose a game. And that's where the SEC stands right now. The odds to win the SEC, Georgia, a minus 500 favorite, mainly because we know they're already going to be in Atlanta and they're the best team over there. LSU's plus 350, Bama's plus 1,400, and Tennessee is plus 7,500. Look, the SEC is a pretty understood conference at this point. What about the ACC, though? The ACC is thought to be out of this, and that is not a controversial take at all, because as far as the playoff goes, yeah, it's pretty much true. The ACC is out of this. But what about the conference championship? Well, right now, Clemson has the Atlantic locked up. I mean, they would need to lose 2 games coming up, Louisville and Miami. So they're there. North Carolina has essentially locked up the Coastal. I mean, North Carolina's still undefeated in conference play, and the next closest team has 2 losses over there. So we are probably training headlong towards Clemson versus North Carolina in the ACC championship game. That is North Carolina's schedule. A lot of people are texting me and DMing me saying, why aren't you talking about North Carolina more when it comes to the playoff picture? And I direct them to this graphic. Where is the resume? Where is the meat on the bone? They've got a loss against Notre Dame. That was the game they needed. Now, that would bolster them a little bit more. If they're undefeated and they're in the conference championship picture and they got to win over Notre Dame, that would be great. But the Notre Dame game was their shot, and they didn't win it. And elsewhere, it's just a lot of average to below average ACC teams. I mean, they've got a game against Wake Forest coming up. They got NC State. They could win against Clemson. I don't think it would be enough, guys. I don't think that. And I haven't heard a single word out of anybody on that committee's mouths to suggest otherwise. So that's where the ACC is right now. The Big Ten's messy, but it's really not. It's messy in a sense that we have no clue who's going to come out of the West. But whoever comes out of the West is going to get body bagged in the Big Ten championship game. And Illinois has got to lose somewhere. If they don't, it's going to be them. But if they do lose, please look at your screen right now. Illinois has got 2 losses over there in conference play. And then Minnesota's got 3, Wisconsin's got 3, Purdue's got 3, Iowa's got 3, Nebraska's got 4. So it's like Illinois and a cast of thousands over there. It's like a bucket of crabs, and the Illinois crab is almost at the top of the bucket, and all the other little Western Division crabs are just trying to grab on. I really hope nobody tuned in right that second, because they probably tuned right back out. Point is, yeah, it looks muddy. It's really not. The Big Ten championship game is 2 days after Thanksgiving in Columbus, Ohio. We will probably be there. I don't know that there's going to be a bigger game that day for the Every Given Saturday tour. Michigan at Ohio State. I think if you were to have looked at odds, earlier in the year, 2-touchdown spread, I think it's going to be a single-digit spread by the time that game kicks off. And as we have learned recently, painfully in some cases, no one really cares about point spreads in these games anymore anyway. What about the Big 12? I'm rubbed the wrong way by how the Big 12 is being treated right now. I care about the Big 12. I think it's been an ultra-competitive conference this year. I think it's been the most entertaining conference in college football. I heard someone say earlier today, well, TCU's resume doesn't look as good as it had looked. Why, you may ask? Because a lot of these teams they've beaten have lost other games. Allow me to suggest to you, it's impossible for that not to happen when you play a full round-robin schedule in conference. So TCU beats these teams early in the year. The conference is packed like Vienna sausages inside the can that is the Big 12, and they all play each other, and we're shocked when, you beat Kansas earlier, but they've lost some games since then. You beat Oklahoma State, they've lost some games since then. Yeah, they all play each other. How was that going to happen any other way? So anyway, TCU's got a really good resume to me. They've still got, check this out, at Texas this week, they're a 7-point dog. They'll go to Baylor after that. Back-to-back road stretch, they'll be a dog in that game too. That didn't matter when they played Oklahoma, mind you, but they will be a dog. So TCU sitting there, they obviously control their own destiny, or at least I think they do. But they would have to lose to both Texas and Baylor and have Texas and Baylor win out the rest of the way for them not to go to the conference championship game. So it is likely that TCU is in the Big 12 championship game. But who do they face if they're there? Could be a rematch of who they see this weekend, for example. Now, I think a lot of folks in the Big 12, ironically, are kind of pulling for TCU this Saturday because that gets Texas out of the way, and everyone hates Texas out there with a white-hot passion of 10,000 suns anyway, but also it gets Texas out of the way in a sense that then Baylor and TCU is already there, but Baylor is sitting there saying, okay, that clears the path a little bit more for us. Baylor, Kansas State, Texas, they're all sitting there. Baylor's the most interesting team. You're looking at their schedule right now. They play Kansas State this week. They play TCU the next week, and they go to Texas in the final week. So all of these teams that are lined up, there's one squad that gets to play them all, and that's Baylor. So I wouldn't say Dave Aranda is sitting right where he wants to be sitting because they've already got 2 losses, but they're kind of where they need to be sitting because they're the team that in the conference race still controls their own destiny. I think for the college football playoff, yes, barring some abject chaos, it is TCU as your hope. In the Pac-12, and this is where you need to listen to me, Pac-12 Pate and all, USC, UCLA, Oregon, they all have one loss. Oregon's loss, though, is not in Pac-12 play. So Oregon is the undefeated team out there in conference play. You've still got USC versus UCLA, I think next week, actually. Jesse, isn't it next week or either the week after? It's not the final week of the season. So we know we have that. We know Oregon still has to play Utah. So there's still a lot to be decided. I would argue the Pac-12 championship race is only just now starting to come into focus. But remember, there was a shift out there this year. And I don't think a lot of people still have grasped this. They play in divisions. I'm going to lose you, I know, because this makes no sense. They play in divisions. They got a north, they got a south. However, they're irrelevant because at the end of the year, they're not taking the Northern Division champ and the Southern Division champ and putting them in the conference title game. They're just taking the best 2 teams. Well, Josh, why do they have divisions then? I have no idea, but they do. And so we're just taking the top 2 teams here. Now, there's a lot of speculation out there that the Pac-12 wants USC to win the conference. And that is because the Pac-12 absolutely wants USC to win the conference, as do television networks. We don't really get into that because we don't care because we don't make money off of that. So I just want to see the best team win. Oregon's the most interesting team. I told you, if they win out, that resume gets massively boosted relative to what it already is. And they've still got several opportunities to impress. And we're going to break their game down a little bit later. So I'm just fascinated if the head-to-heads come into play. I'm also fascinated, you know what I would love to know? I'd love to know if LSU were to lose, this is unlikely, but if LSU were to lose against Arkansas and A&M, Bama wins out. Bama wins the SEC West in that case. And they pull some miracle against Georgia like they did last year. What would the committee do with them? Everybody thinks Bama's out of it. I do too. I think they're probably out of it, like 95% out of it. But there's statistically and there's logically a shot still for them, and they would come out of nowhere. Like, they would not even come off the top rope. They would Sting style. They would lower themselves from the rafters and say, "Here we are." You know, you open the shirt, you take the mask off, and there's that script A, and they're an SEC champ with 2 losses. That would be wild, unlikely, but wild. So long way to go, still a lot to be sorted out. I just wanted to give you some thoughts there. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.